Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with the keywords that made headlines this week. North Korea sending mixed signals to the U.S. rejecting scaled-back military drills while keeping the door open to dialogue with President Donald Trump. Seoul is urging Beijing to help bring North Korea back to dialogue and support denuclearization efforts as South Korea and China work to rebuild ties amid deepening regional tensions. President Lee Jae-myung has welcomed Trump's move to scale back joint military drills, praising it as a bold step toward renewed dialogue with North Korea and peace on the Korean Peninsula. President Lee has called for a watertight security posture, stressing stronger defense capabilities and a seamless transition of wartime operation control to South Korea. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min has the details.
Presiding over a cabinet meeting on the first day of the Ulji exercise, President Lee Jae-myung called for an airtight security posture corresponding to the changing global security environment.
군대뿐만 아니라 경제, 사회 모든 분야에서 작은 빈틈도 발생하지 않도록 안보 위협 대비에 늘 만전을 기해야 되겠습니다.
Highlighting South Korea's robust defense capability, the South Korean commander-in-chief also urged for greater advancement in operational capability.
이를 위해서 전시작전권의 임기 내 완수를 당초 정부 계획에 따라서 차질 없이 추진해 나가야겠습니다.
He also instructed his officials to continue their preparation to newly open an integrated military academy for future warfare and urged that the joint project with the U.S. to construct nuclear power submarines be carried out in a speedy manner.
동맹이 굳건해야 안보의 근간이 더 튼튼해질 것이고 또 우리 자신의 힘을 키워야 동맹으로서의 가치와 필요성도 더 커지게 됩니다.
Earlier, he presided over an Ulji National Security Council meeting and reviewed the country's ability to mobilize its full capabilities in times of conflict. President Lee said the drills were designed to protect the lives of the people and were defensive in nature. The 4-day nationwide civil defense drills run parallel with the South Korea-U.S. combined defense exercises. With the installation of new leadership in the ruling Democratic Party, the president also called for cooperation, apparently sending a message not just to the opposition, but also to the DP, which went through a factional conflict during its leadership contests.
국민의 삶을 외면하고 서로를 적대시하는 백해무익한 정쟁보다는 대체불가 대한민국을 만들기 위해 다 함께 손을 맞잡을 때입니다.
Yoon Jung-min, ArirangNews.
Korea's ruling party begins a new chapter under newly elected Kim Min-seok's leadership with unity and policy coordination emerging as key tests following a closely fought race. Our Moon Hae-ryun went to Democratic Party's National Convention in Daejeon to file this report.
The ruling Democratic Party has chosen Kim Min-seok as its new leader. Kim defeated rival Chung Cheong-rae in Monday's vote, winning 54.08% to Chung's 45.92%, after neither candidate secured a majority in the first round, sending the contest to a preferential runoff. Kim, who served as Prime Minister under President Lee Jae-myung, entered the race as a frontrunner, campaigning as the candidate best placed to support the administration's agenda. Chung, a party veteran known for his hardline reformist stance, emphasized his credentials to advance a reform agenda. In his acceptance speech, Kim framed his election as a mandate to support the president and lead the party with unity.
Our party will work tirelessly to make President Lee Jae-myung's administration a success, because its success means success for the people. We'll debate when we need to, speak up when something needs to be said, stand as a shield when necessary, and make sure the voices of the people are heard.
President Lee also sent a congratulatory video message to the convention, urging party members to unite behind the new leadership after a period of fierce debate and competition. As leader, Kim will help advance the administration's agenda, including major semiconductor projects, while facing tax reform, housing measures, market stabilization, and constitutional reform. The party holds an outright majority in the National Assembly, giving Kim a central role in legislative strategy. The closer-than-expected margin pointed to continued support for Chung's approach, reflected in the new leadership, where 3 of 5 elected Supreme Council seats went to Chung-aligned figures, leaving Kim the task of bringing together different voices within the Democratic Party. Kim's leadership will now be tested by how effectively he can steer those different camps together to bring the party through the administration's policy agenda. 문혜련, 아리랑뉴스 대전.
On the scaling back of annual South Korea-U.S. joint military drills, President Lee Jae-myung says he respects U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to revive dialogue with North Korea. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Citing President Trump's recent social media posts, President Lee Jae-myung said he agrees with the U.S. leaders' will and efforts to build peace on the Korean peninsula, even at the cost of scaling down the annual Seoul-Washington combined defense drills. On social media on Wednesday, Lee called it a big decision to move beyond hostility and said he respected the U.S. president's efforts to create an environment to resume dialogue with North Korea. The South Korean president hoped for trust building and a resumption of talks between North Korea and the U.S., reiterating to take on the role of a pacemaker, while Trump plays the role of a peacemaker. He added that he hoped to meet with his American counterpart in the near future. He also said he fully agreed with Trump that Seoul should be responsible for its own defense, comments he often revisits, adding that the country is ranked 5th in global military power and that it aims to increase defense spending to 3.5% of its GDP.
동맹이 굳건해야 안보의 근간이 더 튼튼해질 것이고 또 우리 자신의 힘을 키워야 동맹으로서의 가치와 필요성도 더 커지게 됩니다.
On the efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the South Korean leader noted that the country will continue to communicate closely with the U.S. and review its contribution within the purview of domestic law. Trump has accused South Korea of not joining action against Iran. The main opposition People Power Party criticized President Lee's comments on the reduction of the joint drill as a, quote, psychological victory, arguing that the Iran war and a delay in U.S. investment are the main factors. Yoon Jung-min, ArirangNews.
Hanwha Aerospace has been selected to supply K9 self-propelled howitzers to the U.S. Army, marking a major milestone for Korea's defense industry. The deal was formalized Tuesday in agreement with the U.S. Army. Hong Seo-jung has the details.
Hanwha Defense USA, a subsidiary of Hanwha Aerospace, has entered the U.S. defense market for the first time after signing a deal with the U.S. Army on Tuesday. As the sole supplier under the deal, the company will provide K9 wheeled self-propelled howitzer prototypes for the U.S. Army's Mobile Tactical Cannon program. The deal has a cumulative value of $262.9 million, with the option to include 12 more systems on top of the original 6 prototypes. According to the U.S. Army, the system is expected to replace M777 towed artillery in select units once it passes soldier testing and is fit to field. While the exact procurement number has yet to be confirmed, industry estimates suggest that the potential production requirement could reach around 500 systems worth nearly $7.15 billion. Hanwha Aerospace won the deal for the U.S. Army's artillery modernization amid intense competition from U.S. defense firm Anduril Industries, Germany's Rheinmetall, and Britain's BAE Systems, among others. Before the system moves into full-scale fielding, its performance will be evaluated based on its effectiveness, reliability, and supportability under realistic combat conditions. The significance of the contract lies in the successful partnership between the government and the private sector. Hanwha said government support and swift negotiations continued throughout the entire process, all the way until it secured the contract. The contract marks the fruition of a two-generation effort by Hanwha Group Chairman Kim Seung-yeon and his eldest son, Executive Vice Chairman Kim Dong-kwan. Hanwha Aerospace's push to enter the U.S. defense market dates back to 2017, when the company participated in the Association of the United States Army's annual conference in Washington, D.C. After identifying the U.S. Army's mobile tactical cannon business in its 2024 budget plan, the company began developing the K9MH that same year. Hanwha Aerospace is accelerating its localization efforts by signing a 3-year lease for manufacturing facilities in Alabama, strengthening its presence in the local supply chain and paving the way to become a long-term partner in the U.S. Army's artillery modernization efforts. Hong Seo-jung, ArirangNews.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he expects to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un later this year while publicly estimating the size of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal. The remarks are fueling questions over a possible shift in Washington's North Korea policy. Park Jun-an tells us more.
U.S. President Donald Trump once again highlighted his personal relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and said he would meet Kim for a summit later this year. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump also provided an update on the exact size of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal.
The fact that I get along with him, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. He has 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. Should have never allowed it to happen. They should have never allowed it. If I were president, I wouldn't have allowed it, but he's got them.
Trump also confirmed he expects to meet Kim Jong-un later this year. The U.S. president could potentially be in Asia in mid-November for the annual APEC summit, which is being held in China. Trump's specific mention of 57 nuclear warheads closely aligns with recent estimates from international think tanks. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute recently estimated that North Korea has assembled around 60 warheads, while the U.S. Congressional Research Service cited estimates at around 50. However, a sitting U.S. president publicly confirming this number is raising questions about a potential policy shift. For decades, the U.S. has maintained a stance of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. But openly recognizing the specific number of weapons is being interpreted by some as treating North Korea as a de facto nuclear power. With the U.S. administration showing a strong preference for deal-making, some say the U.S. could recognize North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and change its diplomatic stance by seeking a freeze of its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. Park Jun-an, ArirangNews.
North Korea has rejected reduced joint military drills proposed by the U.S. while leaving the door open to dialogue with President Donald Trump. Analysts say the mixed signal suggests both sides are testing each other's intentions. Kim Do-yeon reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump sent a series of comments and claims in an effort to reach out to North Korea, which also prompted a response in what analysts now see as a phase of testing the waters between both sides. North Korea's Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, shared a message through state-run media Korean Central News Agency at 10 p.m. Wednesday, dismissing Washington's decision to scale back joint military exercises and denying direct communication between its leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. However, the message's timing has grabbed attention.
That shows Pyongyang sees this as a sensitive issue and intends to manage the message actively and quickly. Responding at 10 p.m., right as the details were coming out of the U.S. side, shows a strong intent to actively manage the message.
While Kim Yo-jong claimed the regime feels no interest in temporary drill reduction, saying Pyongyang will not respond if Washington attempts to frame the scale-back exercises as a goodwill gesture, she emphasized the North Korean leader still maintains good memories and feelings toward Trump personally.
This isn't a direct refusal to talk. I think it's Pyongyang maintaining ambiguity around the two leaders' personal ties, while pressing Washington to come forward with a firmer, more concrete commitment to end its hostile policy toward the North.
Analysts say North Korea is holding out for substantial policy shifts before agreeing to formal negotiations. Meanwhile, South Korea's unification ministry urged the regime to engage, noting that Trump's decision aims to initiate dialogue and promote peace. A ministry official stressed that ending the war and establishing peace on the Korean peninsula must be prioritized above all else. Kim Do-yeon, ArirangNews.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up his first official visit to South Korea in nearly 5 years, with both sides outlining new areas of cooperation while navigating differences over North Korea and regional security. And today we have our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Seong with us in the studio for an in-depth discussion. Welcome, Seong.
It's great to be here, Sujin.
So to start us off, can you tell us about the significance of Wang's visit and also his meeting with Foreign Minister Cho Yeon? Well, I would say that the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit really highlighted the momentum to fully restore bilateral ties as agreed by President Lee Jae-myung and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Gyeongju last November, as well as Beijing this January. It also marked the Chinese diplomat's first official visit to South Korea since September 2021 and his first face-to-face meeting with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun in 11 months. On bilateral relations, the ministers agreed to use next year's 35th anniversary of the start of bilateral relations to elevate their ties, focusing on services and investment negotiations, supply chain stability, people-to-people and cultural exchanges, even bringing pandas to Korea and preserving Korean independence movement sites in China. Cho also raised Ho's concerns over 2 Chinese aquaculture structures in the Korea-China Provincial Measure Zone in the West Sea and requested stronger protection for Korean citizens in China. Now, I'd say that these agreements are quite meaningful in showing the willingness to, again, fully restore bilateral ties. The reference to cultural exchanges is particularly notable. Since 2016, China has unofficially restricted Korean concerts, television programs, films and other cultural content following Ho's decision to deploy the US THAAD missile defense system to the country. Beijing, of course, has never formally acknowledged imposing such restrictions, commonly known as the Korean wave ban, and the removal has remained unresolved for nearly a decade.
Right, and a lot of focus is on what still remains unresolved, particularly about North Korea. So can you tell us more about this?
You're exactly right, Sejin. So most of the media attention has very much been on the topic of North Korea, the language surrounding Pyongyang. In his opening remarks and throughout their meetings, Ho's foreign minister referred to the need for denuclearization.
As much as President Lee Jae-myung presented a blueprint for peaceful coexistence on the Korean peninsula in his recent Liberation Day address, the government will continue working toward the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and the achievement of peace.
Both Cho and National Security Advisor Wi Sung-lak explained President Lee's proposed multilateral dialogue on ending the Korean War, but it seems that the matter was not further discussed. Wang spoke publicly about peace and stability without using the term denuclearization, just as he admitted it in his meeting with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun last year.
We also hope that South Korea and North Korea can gradually move along the path towards peace and coexistence, and sincerely wish for the continued stability and development of the Korean peninsula.
Speaking to reporters as he left the Foreign Ministry on Wednesday, Wang said renewed dialogue was a matter for the United States and North Korea to decide. He placed the onus very much on Washington, saying that it must change its long-standing hostile policy towards North Korea. Now, experts point to Pyongyang's stronger ties with Moscow as a factor affecting China's position.
China now has very limited room to act. A key reason is the growing importance of North Korea's relations with Russia.
In wanting to maintain some form of trilateral alignment among North Korea, China, and Russia, this is not necessarily disadvantageous for China in building a front against the US. Thus, China has no reason to step in directly and try to persuade North Korea.
There was also no mention of issues rooted in the broader US-China strategic rivalry, such as Taiwan and Seoul's security alignment with Washington and Tokyo, technology controls, as well as competing supply chain partnerships, and of course Korea and the US's defense and shipbuilding cooperation.
From China's perspective, Korea acquiring nuclear-powered submarines would erode the strategic and military advantage Beijing has enjoyed in Asia since the Second World War. This is also intertwined with stronger trilateral cooperation among Korea, the US, and Japan, which China strongly opposes.
So President Lee's meeting with Wang showed that both sides want to improve relations. So can you tell us what came from Thursday's meeting?
Sure. So President Lee said that his 2 meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the Gyeongju APEC meeting last November and their summit in Beijing 2 months later had brought about the full restoration of bilateral ties. He asked Wang to maintain close strategic communication with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and National Security Advisor Wi Sung-lak on bilateral ties and the Korean Peninsula. Now, Wang in return conveyed Xi's greetings and pledged to implement the agreements reached by the 2 leaders. The 2 sides also agreed to work towards another Xi summit during the APEC gathering in Shenzhen this November. So the next test will be whether this renewed communication produces any movement on North Korea.
US President Donald Trump, of course, reportedly wants another meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as early as this autumn, with his expected trip to Shenzhen's APEC summit seen as one possible window. Now, as APEC's host, Xi would be in a position to discuss the issue directly with President Trump next month when he visits Washington, D.C., and potentially facilitate contact with Pyongyang by inviting Kim Jong-un. But of course, all of this now at the current moment remains a lot of speculation.
As always, it looks like we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much for coming in today, Sian.
Thanks ever so much for inviting me.
The global race to secure critical minerals is heating up, with countries looking to diversify their supply chains beyond China. And now a tungsten mine in Korea is drawing renewed attention as a potential partner for the global market. Kim Jun-ong has a story.
Blasting takes place in the dark as geologists and workers move in and out. This is Sangdong Mine in southern Gangwon-do province, one of the world's largest tungsten mines. Some 4.7 kilometers of tunnels lie beneath the site, where there are an estimated 58 million tons of reserves. Tungsten is invisible to the naked eye, but under UV light in the dark, it becomes visible in a distinctive blue. Sangdong had closed its doors amid competition from cheaper Chinese tungsten. But more than 3 decades later, the mine has reopened with full-scale commercial production. Annual output stands at around 2,300 tons, with processing capacity set to double in phases.
Tungsten deposits here have an average grade of about 0.43%. That's about 3 times the global average, which allows for stable production over the long term.
Tungsten is key to industries from defense and semiconductors to aerospace. Demand has surged for high-performance chips, while the US-Iran war has further strained global supplies. Chinese export controls are adding to the squeeze. The country produces around 80% of the world's tungsten, but supplies have fallen sharply since Beijing restricted exports of critical minerals last year, citing national security. Tungsten prices have soared since then. With critical minerals emerging as a new geopolitical weapon, Washington is racing to cut its reliance on China and diversify supplies. That is putting Sangdong in the spotlight as a key source of non-Chinese tungsten, with most of its output contracted for the U.S.
Building a value chain to develop and supply more tungsten is strategically important for Korea amid China's export controls. This would serve as an alternative supply source for our allies. Such cooperation could later act as a bargaining card for Korea to secure critical resources when needed.
For now, Sangdong handles the initial stages of production, including mining and concentrating. Operator Almonty Korea Tungsten plans additional facilities nearby as plans for downstream processing gain pace. Kim Jun-ong, 아리랑뉴스 영월.
South Korea is aiming to become one of the world's top 3 AI powers by building an ecosystem that connects its strengths in semiconductors, infrastructure, and manufacturing with artificial intelligence. Choi Young-un takes us inside Korea's push to build an AI-powered industrial ecosystem.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly expanding beyond the success of individual models, with competition now extending across a broader ecosystem of semiconductors, AI data centers, and physical AI. As AI becomes increasingly tied to national competitiveness, the South Korean government has set its sights on becoming one of the world's top 3 AI powers. The broader strategy builds on Korea's existing strengths in semiconductors, telecommunications, and automobiles, while seeking to connect them with AI to create a new industrial ecosystem.
소재 부품 장비 등 산업 생태계 전반을 함께 지원할 방안, 그리고 나아가서 피지컬 AI의 발전이 제조, 인공지능 전환의 역량 강화로 이어지는 산업 대도약 전략이 반드시 필요합니다.
Last month, President Lee also held a series of meetings with global big tech leaders and unveiled the San Francisco AI Declaration, signaling the ambition to position Korea as an indispensable player in the global AI supply chain. Experts say securing a leading position in the global AI race means more than developments in technology and innovation.
The first is how well equipped Korea is with infrastructure such as data centers. Then AI models are built on top of that, followed by data, and then the broader adoption of AI across industries to build industrial competitiveness. With all four of these elements, Korea can be considered competitive.
The expansion of AI infrastructure is also closely tied to talent, making advanced computing and research infrastructure essential to retaining domestic AI talent and creating the foundation for further growth. The goal is to turn these investments into stronger industries and ultimately greater export competitiveness. As Korea already has a strong competitive edge in manufacturing, experts say integrating AI into industries where Korea has established expertise could provide a more practical path towards strengthening its position in the global market.
In the short term, securing industrial competitiveness is what matters. Even at the current level, Korea can build competitiveness by taking a full stack approach. There should be a focus on areas that the country is already good at, such as manufacturing, and find ways to integrate AI into those industries and turn that into exports.
As AI rapidly reshapes industries around the world, Korea's challenge is to move beyond developing individual technologies and build an ecosystem that connects infrastructure, talent, and industry, turning its AI ambitions into tangible industrial competitiveness. 조영은, 아리랑뉴스.
That brings us to the end of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.